The bucket tipped, and a wall of water crashed down onto the glass conference table, swallowing the silver laptop in an instant, and in that single, dripping second, 30 years of careful silence shattered into something no one in that boardroom would ever forget. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to do the right thing even when the world is watching, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs it today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this one deserve to be heard. His name was Daniel Reyes, and for 6 years he had pushed a cleaning cart through the marble hallways of Lindqvist Holdings, emptying trash cans long after the executives had gone home to their penthouses and their wine cellars. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and tired eyes that still managed to soften every single night when he walked through the door of his small apartment and found his 8-year-old daughter, Mia, waiting for him with a drawing she'd made at school. Mia had been born with a congenital heart defect, one that required constant monitoring, frequent hospital visits, and a surgery that loomed somewhere in her near future like a storm cloud that never quite broke. Daniel's wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him alone to carry both the weight of grief and the weight of fatherhood, and he had built his entire life around one fragile, unshakable promise, that Mia would never feel like she was missing anything, even if it meant he went without. The janitorial job didn't pay much, but it came with insurance, and insurance was the only thing standing between Mia and a bill that could swallow a family whole. So Daniel showed up every single night, invisible to most of the people whose offices he cleaned, a man in a gray uniform who said, "Good evening," to people who rarely looked up from their phones long enough to answer. He had grown used to being unseen. He told himself it didn't matter, that the people who built skyscrapers out of glass and ambition didn't have time to notice the man who kept their world spotless. But late at night, mopping floors under fluorescent lights, he sometimes let himself wonder what it would feel like to be looked at, really looked at, by someone who understood that his life mattered just as much as theirs. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening in late autumn, when a fire broke out on the 22nd floor. It wasn't large, an electrical fault in a server closet near the executive boardroom, but the smoke alarm screamed through the building, and the small flicker of orange light against the dark glass was enough to send a ripple of panic through the handful of employees still working late. Daniel was 3 floors below when he heard the alarm, and without thinking, without hesitation, he grabbed the nearest thing he could find that held water, a mop bucket sitting by the utility closet, and ran. He burst into the boardroom to find chaos. 2 junior executives stood frozen near the window, and at the head of the long glass table sat Elena Whitfield, the CEO of Lindqvist Holdings, her laptop open in front of her, completely unaware that the wiring panel behind her had begun to spark. Daniel didn't think about titles or hierarchies or the fact that the woman in the expensive red blazer signed off on budgets that decided whether people like him kept their jobs. He saw a small flame licking toward a stack of papers dangerously close to her hands, and he did the only thing his body knew how to do. He swung the bucket and threw the water directly across the table, dousing the spark before it could become something far worse. The water hit everything in its path. Papers. The table. And Elena's laptop, which sank beneath the flood with a small, fatal hiss. For a moment, nobody moved. Elena stared at her ruined laptop, then at the soaked stranger in the gray uniform standing before her, his chest heaving, his hands still trembling from adrenaline. The fire was out. What could have been a tragedy had been reduced to a faint curl of smoke, but all she could see was the device sitting dead in a puddle of water, and rage flickered across her face before she could stop it. She demanded to know who he was, why he'd ruined her laptop, whether he understood what was on it. Daniel, soaked and breathless, simply said that there had been a fire near her chair and he didn't have time to think about anything except getting her away from it safely. It was one of the junior executives, still shaking, who pointed out the obvious, that the sparking panel directly behind Elena's seat could have caught her sleeve, her hair, the papers in front of her, within seconds. The fire investigator who arrived 20 minutes later confirmed it. Had the small fire not been extinguished immediately, it likely would have spread up the curtain beside the window, directly engulfing the area where Elena had been sitting. It was only later, once the building had been cleared and the panic settled into a stunned quiet, that someone finally asked Daniel why he hadn't simply run for help instead of grabbing a bucket himself. He explained, simply, that there hadn't been time, that in his experience, when something you love is in danger, you don't wait for someone else to come save it. You move. Elena, listening from a few feet away wrapped in a blanket a security guard had given her, went very still when she heard those words, because something in his voice told her this wasn't a man speaking in metaphors. This was a man who had lived that truth. Over the following days, Elena Whitfield did something almost nobody at Lindqvist Holdings expected. She asked about him. She learned about Mia, about the surgery on the horizon, about the 6 years Daniel had spent invisible in a building he had ultimately protected with his own bare hands. She learned that the man she had nearly screamed at over a ruined laptop had quite possibly saved her life, and that he had done it without a second of hesitation, without once thinking about what it might cost him. The laptop, it turned out, held nothing that couldn't be recovered from the cloud within an hour. But what Daniel had protected that night could never have been replaced. Elena personally covered the cost of Mia's surgery. Not as charity, she insisted, but as a debt, one human being honoring what another had given without being asked. She created a new position for Daniel, one with better pay, daytime hours, and benefits that meant he would never again have to choose between rent and his daughter's heart. And in the months that followed, something rare happened in that glass tower full of strangers. People started learning each other's names. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that the people we overlook are so often the ones carrying the heaviest love, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And before you go, do one small thing for me. Comment the word kindness below, just so I know this story reached you. Daniel still cleans up messes for a living, in a way. But these days, when he walks past Elena's office, she looks up. She always looks up. And Mia, healthy and laughing, draws him a new picture every single week, proof that sometimes the bravest thing a father can do is simply refuse to hesitate when it matters most.